growth rate of consumption in this model, if you have a balanced growth path, it will be constant. If we go back to the Ramsey model, it is not constant. If you have too much capital, the consumption growth rate falls down. If you too little capital, the consumption rate goes up. That's the reason why you can have a constant consumption level in the steady state. Later on, in this model, the return rate is constant. It does not depend on the capital stock. So that's the reason why we could have a sustainable growth. The return rate never falls. In another mode, the economy can grow because the return rate from investment does not fall. Just like maybe you have learned the book of Das Capital by Karl Marx. In that book, there's one argument: the capitalism world will have has a fatal problem because they have diminished return to capital. Okay. That is true in the Ramsey model, but not true in this AK model. In the AK model, the return rate never falls, so we can have a sustainable growth. And this expression exactly gives you the growth rate for consumption. Okay, so from the technology, we know that the C is constant by assumption. Okay, and consumption is growing by some speed. Then we can solve for the growth rate of capital C. And we know that in the balanced growth path is balanced, so the share of capital allocated in sector 1 and sector 2 must be constant. So this kappa will be constant. If Kc is growing at some constant rate, then Ki and K must also grow at the same constant rate in order to keep the ratio constant. So as a result, we can solve for the connection between GC and GK. It's given by the Cobb-Douglas production function. Okay, so the first equation has both GC and GK showing up. The second one also has both. We have two equations, two unknowns. Now we can solve for the balanced growth path GK and GC from these two equations. That's these two expressions, GK and GC. And we also know that the wage is given by the marginal return to labor in competitive market. PC is constant. KT is growing at some speed. So W is also growing at some constant rate. That's the growth of the wage. It's very easy to verify that in this economy, a fraction of the outputs in the sector 1 will be given to labor. Okay, so we sort of have some like a labor share and capital share arguments in this model. And also, another interesting thing is about the price of investment goods. From this expression, we know that price of investment is falling down. If the GK is growing faster, then this price goes down also faster. This is the reason why we can have sustainably growing capital, but the economy is still balanced. We have more and more capital, but the capital is also cheaper and cheaper. So the market value for capital does not grow like the capital. Okay, so that's the reason why we can have balance, even if these two sectors are growing asymmetrically. Yeah, take a look at these two production functions. The investment good is growing at the same speed as K, but consumption good is at the speed of K times alpha. Consumption is growing slower. Investment good is growing good faster, but the price of investment good is falling down. So in the end, the market value or the relative market value of consumption good over the investment good will be constant. It's balanced. Okay. There's two sections. Balance growth. Okay, so this model shows that there is continuing capital deepening. So we have more and more capital compared with the output levels in the economy. We start to use more and more capital in production. The capital output ratio, if you measure it in real terms, is going up. But if you measure it in market values, it may not go up. There's one shortcoming of this model. We just show the balance growth. Right? So the transitional dynamics for a two-sector model is not so easy to solve. But I will tell you that this model does not have transitional dynamics. No matter where you start with, you will always grow at the same rate in the future, just like in the AK model. So that's the shortcoming. So in this paper 10, those authors tries to construct a model in which you have two sectors, you have sustainable growth, but also you have transitional dynamics. So this is an interesting one. You may want to take a look. Of course, this paper is harder than paper 9. It's later. So the AK model seems to be mechanical because we assume that there's no diminishing returns in at least one sector, at least a part of the economy. So we actually do not explain why there's no diminishing returns. Now people try to think about why. One possibility is to assume there is some externality. So intuition is like this. For each individual firm, if you start to accumulate more and more capital, you will always encounter the diminishing returns. You cannot accumulate the capital all the time. However, as long as the economy as a whole has accumulated a lot of capital, the economy also accumulates a lot of knowledge. Because capital is in the form of device, equipment. You have more of that, you know more about the world. So if for example, if the Apple company, they try to have more machines to produce iPhones, then other companies like Huawei and Samsung, they can learn from the capital accumulation of Apple to have better production in their own. This is the way to capture the speed over of the knowledge. You accumulate the capital, but it benefits others. So that's the reason why we call it the externalities. With these externalities, it will be interesting to see the difference between market equilibrium and social planning. As I just mentioned, This is the work of the Nobel Prize winner last year. This is the model to show technology speed over. Now here comes the model. We have a production function for each firm I. Each firm has its own labor hiring, capital, and the output. And the total number of capital they use will be equal to the capital supply in the rental market. And it's the same for labor. And here we assume there's no labor growth for simplicity. Okay, let me go back and say something more about why labor has to be. Oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. So let's go on. Labor has to be constant. Labor does this model. We assume labor is constant because we want to simplify the analysis. The previous model, labor does not show up in the analysis. In the last model, externality, labor has to be constant. Otherwise, the model doesn't work. You will see why. The competitive equilibrium gives us the connection between wage and rental rate, between these variables and the marginal returns of labor and capital, as in the Solomon model. And now is the externality. We assume that the technology A, which is taken as given for each individual, is a function of the aggregate capital stock in the economy. So for each individual, you have this constant technology. But if the economy as a whole accumulates more capital, you will have better technology for yourself. So A is a function of K. Now you could plug AT into the production function. Suppose suppose all firms are doing the same thing. Now you have the aggregate production function like this. Okay. Now let's introduce some notations and normalizations. Usually F is a constant returns to scale function, and then we can take the capital out. Y over capital is equal to this. Then we have a function of L, and we denote this as a little f cubed. Notation 1. This is the output capital ratio. And notation 2, we have the output per person. So you have capital both in the numerator and the denominator. So you can have two ratios. The first ratio is the capital per person. The second ratio is the little f cubed. Okay. So from these two conditions, we can also obtain the connection between W and R and F cubed. It will be something like this. Interestingly, the return rate is a constant if labor is constant. Does not depend on time. Why? In the Ramsey model, if you accumulate more capital, then the return rate will be lower. But in this model, if the economy as a whole has more capital, it also affects the second terms. You have better technology, and you can produce more. So these second effects cancel out the first effect from diminishing returns. So in the end, you will have constant return rate as a result of externality. The externality is assumed such that it just cancels out the diminishing returns. It gives you a constant return as a whole. Of course, for each individual firm, you have diminishing return, but as an economy as a whole, you have constant. Now we have the return rate. Both return rate minus delta will be the net return rate, and we go back to this formula, which gives you the function, and you apply this one here, you will get the growth rate for the economy. It's interesting that the growth rate of economy is determined by labor. Okay. So that means if you have an increasing population, it's possible that your growth rate explodes. You no longer have constant growth rate. So that's the reason why in this model we cannot have a growing population. This is also the shortcoming of this model. Of course, you can find a way to get around this problem, but in this original model, it is a shortcoming. You have to have a constant labor size. The reason is labor is here. It's multiplied by the technology. If the labor is increasing, then you are actually amplifying the effect from this scenario. Then the problem will be out of control. Well, in terms of mathematics, it's not desirable. But in reality, this may be reasonable in some cases. For example, usually small countries cannot make big innovation. So if the country only has 1 million population, don't expect the country to invent a lot of things. They usually learn from others. We don't model how you learn from others here. But if a country has a lot of population like China, it's very easy for this country to learn from other countries. We have a lot of engineers who can copy the products from the US. Right? And after you copy the products, you share knowledge in the economy. Right? So that makes the technology speed over easy if you have more labor. So higher labor force, higher growth rate. If you want to have the positive growth rate, of course, the right-hand side has to be positive. Then you have to have this one satisfied. Rho has to be smaller than something. Rho is the discount rate of the household. It measures the impatience of the household. How much you discount the future. If the household does not discount the future so much, which means the rho is very small, then it's more likely the economy is growing positively. Or in this equation, if rho is smaller, then GC is larger. More impatient economy will be growing faster. That is consistent with the experience of the East Asian countries like China, Japan, Singapore, South Korea. And also, don't forget about the transversality condition. The transversality condition requires that the growth rate cannot be too fast. Otherwise, your capital stock in the economy will be growing too fast. That will violate the transversality condition. In that situation, the mathematical tool we use to solve for the optimization problem is no longer correct. I'm not saying that this cannot happen in the real world. I'm saying that if this happens, then all the tools used to solve the model is no longer right. So if you want to solve the model, you must have the conditions such that the transversality condition holds. This is the tool for mathematical tools, not for the reality. And if that happens, you can solve for the transversality condition. It implies that you have to have this. We know that sigma is positive. So this number here is smaller than that number on the right-hand side. That means you can always find some rho between these terms and that terms, such that you have positive growth and the transversality condition is satisfied. Okay, this is the situation in which this model is meaningful. slide seems to be redundant. Yes, the slides of scale effect is redundant. Please forget about scale effect. Okay, so now we can think about a social planner's problem. The social planner care about the household. We have utility function like this. And the log motion for capital, after we use the notation F tilde, will be this one. We can verify that by ourselves. And we can do the same thing of the Hamiltonian conditions like this. And we solve everything in the same way. Then you can get a social planner's growth. Now let's compare the social planner's growth rate with the multi-clearance growth rate. Here you subtract something, right? In the market equilibrium growth rate. In the social planner's problem, this term disappeared. So that means the social planner's growth rate will be always higher than the competitive equilibrium's growth rate. That is in terms of the mathematical result. Now, we will also want to think about the intuition behind the difference of these two growth rates. Why is the minus sign missing in the social planner's problem? So we know that this term here is related to the return rate of capital in the economy. Okay, so the return rate of capital is derived by take the first order derivative with respect to k before you plug the expression of a inside. So when you do the derivative here, you actually have some diminished returns. That's the reason why you may have some additional terms here. But if you think about the return of capital in the society as a whole, then you should take derivative with respect to this one instead of another one, instead of an individual one. If you take derivative with respect to the aggregate production function, then you have k show up both in the first argument and in the second argument. When you take derivative with respect to both, we can interpret as a social planner taking into account both the private incentive to accumulate capital and the public benefits to accumulate capital. Or in other words, the social planner is taking this part of analysis into account. Because this production function is constantly coming to scale, so you can take this k outside. You have k times f something. So in terms of when the social planner is facing a problem in which your capital has some constant returns, and then if you take the first order condition, you will get the first term without the second term. So the missing part in the social planner's growth rate shows that the social planner actually takes the externality into account and facing a constant problem. That's the reason why they are different. So this model also tells us maybe if we have externality, knowledge spillover in the economy, the market equilibrium will not give you a sufficiently fast growth rate. If you want to speed up the growth, the government may play a role. The government may encourage investment because the investment is associated with technology spillover. The government may reduce the tax for investment by the same reason, right? So the externality here allows us to have a role of government policy. We can discuss the optimal policy. For example, we could have some investment credit. So if you make some investment, the government will give you some bonus payment or benefits to you, or they cut the tax. You can use the government policy tools to recover the social planners' problem. By encouraging the private firms to make investment, you could improve their growth rate such that the growth rate is identical to the social plan. So as a result, we are in the market equilibrium. We are in the market-oriented economy. We are not in the social planners economy like the China 40 years ago. However, the government can take advantage of the market forces and design some policy to achieve a goal that can be achieved in the perfect social plan. We know that if the government is social planner, you cannot monitor the private agents, and the people do not have enough incentive to work or do their own things. So that's the reason why we abandoned the planners, the planned economy. But now we are in the market economy, and we can define some policy to achieve the possible or the best possible growth rate as in the planned economy. So that's the idea of the policy here. So this is all we have for. Okay, let's make some short summary before the ending. We have used the tool of optimal control to model the endogenous saving rate and endogenous sustainable growth. The model can rationalize why countries do not converge in per capita incomes. If we have some constant growth rate, then different countries may have different growth rate. In the end, the world income distribution may expand instead of shrink. You may have a world with more and more unequal world, according to this model. However, the simplicity of the algebra as the advanced growth paths in those models also rules out transitional dynamics. That's one of the shortcomings. And also in these models, especially the last two models, we implicitly assume that Harrow neutrality. Harrow neutrality is the situation in which technology is together with labor. Or you can write down this model such that it is equivalent to a model in which technology is together with labor. That's Harrow neutrality. In fact, there are some real-world issues in which this assumption does not apply or is not good enough, is not rich enough to capture the real world. So that's the reason why there is a new paper published in American Economic Review showing that even if you don't have this assumption, you can still have balanced growth paths. You can violate the Buzala theory as we learned in the follow growth model, but still have a balanced growth path. Okay. This is a serious paper. So up to now, we have finished the content. In next week, we will go to